As a market participant, were you braced and ready to move this morning, or did we get what we expected?
You know, we're in a kind of a world where there's a bit of a shoving match, and I think it's largely to be expected. There's not a massive clarity around what this could look like, and it's continued back and forth at this point in time. I think what we're seeing more broadly is the degree to which geopolitics is entering and becoming another source of volatility for the markets, something that impacts individual companies and the market more broadly. And the news is sudden and it catches folks off guard.
It does.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ed, you go.
No, I just wanted to point out the other red headline, right? Because the news is just flying through the terminal as we speak. The other one is that President Xi, Marta, says that he wants the United States to refrain from taking unilateral trade measures. Again, we're trying to interpret a readout from China's state news agency, but what is your interpretation of that comment?
I mean, it certainly seems like there are bigger things at play right now. I think the reporting that you all have just shared showing that, yes, TikTok is something that's a primary concern, but there are other primary concerns as it relates to the broader trade relationship. And right now, both sides are trying to find those points of leverage to determine what can be pushed to gain kind of the greatest advantage in this conversation. So it seems like we're kind of listening into one part of the conversation, but it's part of a much broader discussion that's been going on and continues to go on.
Marta, it's interesting timing that JP Morgan Asset Management has put out this thought that actually what trumps geopolitical risk right now is the AI story. And if we get a bad set of numbers, if any earnings look weak in some of these AI stars, that's where the market volatility really comes from. But actually, the whole story around semiconductors is so intertwined with geopolitics as well. So how do you distinguish the two?
Right. It's a pretty fascinating time. I mean, we're looking at company after company that seems to be very in tune to what the Trump administration wants. And I think it underscores this idea that AI isn't just a form of secular growth for companies and for the economy, but it's something that is akin to the space race in terms of sovereign interest. And so I think it adds this whole another dimension that we have to consider as we think about those sources of volatility. I think one consideration here is, what does demand look like if we're looking at a more bifurcated world where potentially US and China aren't necessarily buying from each other as much as they are jockeying with each other when it comes to AI. I'm not sure that necessarily changes the whole AI narrative. We know that there's massive amounts of demand even here just domestically, but I think it's a whole new dimension that we have to consider as we take a look forward and try to project expectations.
And we try to stomach the fact that we're up 16% year to date on the NASDAQ 100 and we're at record highs. So
right.
With all the underlying risks, should you be buying into this market?
You know, in my mind, at this juncture, we're at a point where it makes some sense to rebalance, to take some profits. We've had this tremendous run since April 8th, where we've seen a lot of these companies recover, even something like the Mag 7, which had a much bigger hit in the first part of the year due to DeepSeek. Even that area of the market is beginning to look pricey. Now, companies have delivered. The earnings has been there. The investment in the future, the CapEx has been there. We're seeing demand from the hyperscalers based on AI workflows. So there's a lot of positives to point to, but it really wouldn't take much, something coming out of left field like we saw with DeepSeek, to maybe have people pull back a bit. And I think when we think about these innovation periods, it shouldn't be a straight line higher. That would defy reality. It ought to be something that has fits and starts and moments of doubt. So I think when we're at a period where it feels somewhat euphoric, it's time to position for a potential moment of doubt.